Now let's take a moment and talk about setting up our printers, ranging anywhere from maybe a 4x6 printer all the way up to maybe the Z series, which I have behind me, which is a 24-inch wide roll printer. Now, inside of Mac OS X, I can go into System Preferences and select my Print and Fax area. And I can add in a printer. Now you notice inside of my printer browser, it's brought up a single printer on Bonjour. Now, Bonjour is the technology in Mac OS X which automatically senses printers. Now, this is great because one thing about HP printers is they're automatically aware on the network. You take an Ethernet cable to any HP printer, plug it in, it'll come up on Bonjour. It'll also assign itself an IP address on the fly. So really easy to find printers. Now I'm going to add in this Z Series 2100, and you'll notice that I can select the HP DesignJet driver. Now there's two kinds of printers out there. There's a raster printer and a PostScript printer. If you're using a PostScript printer, you can select any one of the drivers that are installed and located inside of the OS. And this is working with anything like Quark Express, InDesign, Illustrator, anything using fonts or actually drawn PostScript art. Scale it, work with it in a PDF, works great. If you're working with photos and have a raster printer, like the Z series behind me, you really want to go ahead and download their drivers because they have a lot of technology built in that gives you the best print for that. And I would also recommend downloading the latest drivers from their website. They might have boxed this printer up, put it on the shelf, and sent it to you. It might have been a while since they've actually installed or updated these drivers. So make sure you have the latest stuff for your OS and for your applications. Once I've selected the driver that I want to use, let's select that DesignJet. Let's show one more feature, which is called sharing. Now, as I mentioned, the HP printers can be used via IP or plugged directly into your network or your router. They can also be used by USB. Now, if you're using a USB printer, it's great to turn on sharing because then everybody in your network can see that printer. You don't have to have an IP printer. You can do this using the OS. So now I can have everyone in my work group see that DesignJet through access of my computer. Now, of course, if I turn my computer off, it goes away, but a great feature to share that printer with your whole work group. Now that we've set up our printer drivers, let me show you an example of how these work, and let's actually print something out. Well, I'm going to use Preview and another image. And the first thing I'm going to do is to go into Page Setup. And make sure that your page setup is set up for that actual printer. Now, the DesignJet Z21 has a lot of different sizes. I'm going to go to the 24x36 size and then say OK. And now my page setup is done. And I'm going to go ahead and say Print. Now you'll notice inside of my Print dialog box, it gives me my image and doesn't give me a lot of information. Now this is a little weird with OS X, but when I click the Advanced feature, it actually gets rid of the preview, but it is giving me more information. Now, I can pull down and talk about paper handling, what document paper sizes I want to work with, color sync, which is very important because that's color, and we're just going to do a standard conversion. But here's the important part, and this is where HP really shines on their driver technology. They've actually added in some new functionality in their latest drivers for their latest printers. Now you notice that I can see the paper, which seems interesting, but you'll look here down at the bottom. It's telling me right now that on this Z2100 that I'm not set up correctly. I'm looking at a photo gloss, but I actually have a photo satin paper that I've loaded into the printer. And I've put that into the printer, and the driver looks at the printer and talks to it constantly. So now go into paper type, tell the one that I want, and that device status goes away. So giving me some really great information. Now if I select the color tab, there's another area which is great with HP drivers. I can either select printer manage colors, and a lot of printers out there do some really tweaky things with color. They will make it brighter, make it bluer, because they want to make the best print they can. Now, as people dealing with color, we've done everything we wanted to do, right? We attached the right profile when we brought in the camera. We went in the applications and used the right profiles as we went through all of our applications. And now when we're printing, we want to use that same technology and use the application managed colors. Use either the ProPhoto RGB or the Adobe RGB profiles. So now their drivers allow us to turn all of that technology built into the printer off and just have the application, or in this case, the OS, manage those colors for us. Fantastic way to just go ahead and print that file out. So now I can just say print, and out comes this file. A lot of us are used to the workflow of having an image, bringing it into Photoshop, and then maybe dropping it into InDesign or QuarkXPress. Now there's some other applications that have been introduced lately. Aperture from Apple and Lightroom from Adobe, which we have to consider in our color workflow. Now we've taken these images, we've imported them, we have the correct profile assigned to them. Now how do we integrate these applications? Because these are applications that allow us to organize our photos, allow us to take those 50 digital shots that we did and refine it down to maybe one or two, and then maybe we might want to go to Photoshop and do all the work there and then drop it into our workflow. So let's start with Aperture. I've just brought up some canoe images that we've been working on. Notice I have one here. Now this is a raw image, and remember what I said about raw images is that there hasn't been any color information applied to it yet. So if I look inside of Aperture, everything that happens around color happens on the export. So I'm going to bring up File and Export a Version. And you'll notice that I have an export preset of JPEG original size. Well, let's go into the edit area and see what that actually means. Now, if I say JPEG original size, you'll notice that the color sync profile, or the default color sync profile, is sRGB. Now, we talked about other profiles, Adobe 1998 or ProPhoto RGB. And if we're going to a large printer, like we talked about with the Z21 or 3100, we want to make sure we keep that same color space. So we might want to change this. And it's pretty easy. Go to Photo RGB. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and say plus first and go JPEG Pro Photo RGB export. Change that color sync profile and then say OK. Now I have an export preset which has the correct color sync profile that I want to work with. Now when I export this, drag it into Photoshop, I'm not making any color transforms. I'm keeping in the same consistent color workflow that I've done before by going from import into Photoshop. But now I'm using another tool like Aperture to allow me to organize and work with my photos. So last but not least, we want to talk about printing from Photoshop, an application that probably all of us use for printing images. Now, first thing we want to do, of course, with printing from Photoshop is go into Page Setup, just like I do in all of my other applications, Preview, InDesign, QuarkXPress, and make sure that I have the right printer selected, the DesignJet Z2100, and the page size that we're doing, which is the 24 by 36 roll. Once I've said OK, go into Print with Preview, and now I can select all of my color handling. I'm going to let Photoshop determine the colors because, again, I've kept a consistent workflow, same color profile, and working with this on the same image across every application. Importing, maybe you're using Aperture or Lightroom, and then going into Photoshop. And now the printer profile, I can select the printer profile that I'm working with. Again, you'll notice that I have all of the different papers that are located or available to that DesignJet. And I'm going to pick the dry photo satin that I'm working with. And once I select print, up comes the print dialog box. Now this seems a little bit weird, but again, we're talking about going from Photoshop and accessing the HP raster driver, which we install. I'm going to go down to paper handling, make sure that I've got the right document paper size again, and then go to paper type and quality. Now again, with the HP drivers, you can select the correct paper. Now you'll notice that it's also said you don't have the right paper. this driver is actually talking to the printer. I selected the wrong one in the print with preview and it would have been totally messed up. So now it's telling me that I want to select the photo semi-gloss satin paper instead. Well, let's go and select that, and my constraints and device status goes away. I'm ready to go. Now, selecting on the color tab, you'll also notice that it says application managed colors. Just like when we selected preview and it dealt with the OS dealing with it, the application Photoshop is going to do my color management for me and send it down to the printer. So the printer isn't doing adjustments or anything. We have full control of the final print. So working with the DesignJet series printer, any of the applications that you want to work with, either preview in the OS, Lightroom, Aperture, or Photoshop, and working with the raster driver from HP gives you the best control and the best quality of your prints. Well, that's an update on color. For more information and solutions for the creative arts market, visit us at lefthandman.com.